The most powerful beings in Star Wars are not simply the best duelists or the most skilled Force users. The real question is, which kind of power matters? Raw destructive might? The ability to rewrite reality? Or the capacity to shape myths and institutions across generations? That distinction matters because whoever holds the highest form of power sets the rules of the universe. How the Force behaves, what gods and monsters can do, and which characters get to bend fate. To weigh most powerful requires thinking beyond lightsabers and midichlorians and asking what power actually means in a galaxy where metaphysics and narrative weights overlap. To understand that, start with the cosmic and mythic entities that sit beyond ordinary Force users. These are beings or manifestations that operate on a different order, embodiments of cosmic principles, sentient aspects of the Force, or ancient intelligences that can alter space, time, and identity. They don't just win battles, they redefine what counts as a battle. Examining them first shows why raw skill and military might are often secondary to those who can shape reality itself. To judge power in Star Wars, separate two categories: combatants, duelists, emperors, dark lords, and those that define the rules of conflict. The latter behave less like opponents and more like forces of nature, entities that can reshape reality, alter causality, or stand outside time. These are the cosmic and mythic players. They rarely settle a lightsaber duel, they change what a duel can mean. A clear modern canon example appears in the Clone Wars Mortis arc. Three figures, the father, the son, and the daughter, embody the Force's major aspects: balance, darkness, and light. They are not amplified Jedi, they are metaphysical centers whose very presence warps reality on Mortis, healing, resurrecting, amplifying, draining Force energy, and bending fate. In the arc, Anakin's potential as the Chosen One is tested and reflected back at him. The point isn't only capability, but function. The Mortis beings operate like mythic archetypes. They personify abstract principles and enforce rules native to their realm, rules that don't map onto galactic politics. That makes them appear omnipotent within Mortis, yet oddly limited beyond it. Their authority is cosmic, but contextual, tied to the domain that sustains them. The Force itself sits on a spectrum between impersonal field and conscious agent. Traditional Jedi doctrine, alongside Lucas's evolving mythos, distinguishes the living Force, the energy of life and the present, from the cosmic Force, the pattern that gives events meaning. In recent canon, the Force sometimes behaves as more than background energy. It communicates, preserves identity through Force ghosts, and can be shaped into semi-personal spaces like the world between worlds. Behind these concepts is the older framing idea of the Wills and the Journal of the Wills. Originating in Lucas's notes, the Wills have been treated variously as mythic chroniclers, observers, or quasi-entities that record and, in some readings, influence events. Canon and creator notes leave them ambiguous. Sometimes a narrative conceit, sometimes a metaphysical layer with agency. That ambiguity lets the Force feel like a will that isn't strictly a person, a fundamental source of power that nevertheless rarely intervenes as an ordinary antagonist would. Star Wars has dramatized this cosmic side of the Force as a place in Rebels. The world between worlds is a mystical dimension linked to the Force, containing portals into specific moments across time. Characters who enter it can observe or alter events at crucial points, which elevates the Force from energy to navigable architecture. That changes stakes. Time and causality become manipulable, but not without cost. In Rebels, the world between worlds is guarded and dangerous. Its use has consequences and moral complications. Again, cosmic systems extend power beyond ordinary limits while remaining constrained by their own rules, access conditions, and narrative safeguards. Outside current canon, expanded universe materials populate the galaxy with ancient builders and architect species who act at planetary or greater scales. Variously called celestials or architects in legends, these groups are credited with creating planet-scale structures, hyperspace anomalies, and relics that alter how the Force behaves locally. Their artifacts can amplify, contain, or corrupt Force energy across systems. Because much of that material is non-canonical, it functions differently. It explains in quasi-scientific terms where the galaxy's mythic mechanics might come from. Whether canon or legends, the common point is that some sources of power are distributed, engineered, and infrastructural rather than personal. Those are functionally superior to an individual Force user in a given conflict because they change the playing field itself. Why do these presences feel omnipotent? 3 factors recur. First, scale. Planetary, temporal, or metaphysical scope dwarfs individual lives. Second, rule-making. They can alter causality or the conditions that govern existence, so defeating them is conceptual rather than merely tactical. Third, narrative authority. As embodiments of themes, balance, fate, time, they serve story functions that exceed normal antagonism. Yet omnipotence in Star Wars is rarely absolute. The Mortis beings were bound to Mortis and fell when that realm's balance collapsed. The world between worlds is accessible but guarded and precarious. The Force, even when treated as a will, typically acts through intermediaries and leaves room for choice, contradiction, and failure. Ancient artifacts can be hacked, corrupted, or lost. Narrative needs, the necessity of struggle and meaningful choice, impose limits on cosmic players. Those constraints aren't weaknesses so much as mechanisms that keep the saga human-scaled, even when gods appear. Cosmic and mythic entities therefore occupy a special tier. They are not merely stronger duelists, they are structures that define what strong means. They outrank individual heroes in the sense that they can alter rules, but they do so according to different logics, ecological, moral, or mythic rather than tactical. Recognizing that tier reframes the hierarchy of power. An emperor can terrorize a galaxy, but a principle like balance becomes more consequential once the story moves to a metaphysical plane. It also clarifies why debates about most powerful hinge on whether one means most capable in a fight or most able to alter reality. Next, we shift from these metaphysical rule-makers to the strongest individual wielders of the Force, people who, through knowledge, ritual, or pathology, scale up until they begin to rival or affect cosmic balances themselves. Some Force users become so potent they reshape politics, ecosystems, or even death. Their power isn't cosmic principle so much as a combination of technique, ritual knowledge, technology, and sometimes pathological states that scale an individual beyond ordinary Jedi or Sith. Those combinations explain both reach and limits, amplified telekinesis or lightning, engineered longevity through cloning or essence transfer, consumptive pathologies that feed on life, and forbidden lore or rituals that bend ordinary rules. Each lever makes a user dangerous and creates a vulnerability. Palpatine demonstrates the political route. His greatest feat was structural. He turned institutions and people into instruments of his will, converting a republic into an engine for his designs. That manipulation mattered as much as his dual skills. On screen, he uses force lightning, choking, and mind control. Expanded material links him to cloning and essence transfer experiments that account for resurrections in some continuities. Palpatine's example shows how cunning, timing, and procedural knowledge can yield galactic consequences even without metaphysical omnipotence. His limits are human flaws: secrecy, hubris, treacherous apprentices, and techniques that need to be hidden. Darth Plagueis sits at the intersection of science and dread. In film, he's the cautionary name tied to cheating death. In Legends, he becomes a hands-on experimenter with midichlorians, trying to manipulate life's foundation. That work elevates a practitioner from duelist to would-be god. Controlling life at its basis rewrites outcomes for individuals. But such techniques are brittle. They require secrecy, precise conditions, and by their nature, make the practitioner a target. Plagueis' story underlines that procedural knowledge can produce godlike effects and single points of failure. Vitiate, the Sith Emperor of the Old Republic era, represents ritual-scale domination. He used mass rituals and genocidal acts, most infamously the Anathema event, to erase lives and, according to some accounts, alter the Force itself to grant him longevity and influence. Vitiate's power came from turning whole systems into fuel, ritualized brutality amplified by Force mastery. That scale, however, is often site or condition-bound. Rituals can be reversed or interrupted, and a user built on such methods becomes an obvious target for alliances willing to cross moral lines. Revan and Darth Nihilus offer a useful contrast from Knights of the Old Republic lore. Revan displays how arcane knowledge combined with strategic adaptability can produce a user who moves between paradigms: Jedi, Sith, Liberator, while wielding exceptional power. Revan's strength was a mix of tactical genius and access to ancient mysteries that let him exceed usual Force limits. Nihilus, by contrast, is the pure consumptive pathology. He didn't merely dominate minds, he fed on the Force, draining whole worlds until nothing remained. That hunger made him terrifying, but it also stripped him of continuity. The technique that made him powerful turned him into a living weapon whose survival depended on continued consumption, and whose existence was inherently unstable. Abeloth is an example of anomaly and corruption. Born of celestial and ones-related powers in legends, she became a reality-warping, mind-consuming presence after exposure to artifacts and practices she was not meant to encounter. Abeloth shows that beings already linked to the Force can mutate into aberrations that approach cosmic capacity without being cosmic entities themselves. Their motives tend to be alien and compulsive, making them strategically reckless and impossible to reason with. Containment, not negotiation, is the only viable response. That logic also creates a limit. Their own alien drives often lead to mistakes that can be exploited. Luke Skywalker illustrates another route: institutional and ethical amplification. Across continuities, his growth is less about singular, irreversible power and more about rebuilding traditions, training new generations, and applying non-violent Force arts like healing and shielding at scale. In Legends, his feats verge on mythic through philosophical integration and daring restorations. In new canon, his arc is narrower but still significant, projecting presence, reviving Jedi principles. Luke's influence is relational. It sustains communities and continuity rather than annihilating opposition. His limits are ethical choices and mortality. Power alone does not answer which battles to fight or who survives to inherit a tradition. Across these examples, scale emerges from levers: political manipulation, forbidden knowledge, ritual slaughter, or parasitic hunger. Those levers let individuals produce near-cosmic effects, toppling governments, draining planets, or stopping death. But they also define counterplay. Rituals have conditions that can be disrupted. Addictions can be starved. Cloning programs can be exposed. Secret expertise can be uncovered or stolen. Storytelling needs conflicts that matter, so authors consistently introduce choke points, knowledge gaps, material dependencies, or pathological requirements that keep supremacy from becoming absolute. The strongest individual Force users therefore sit in a middle ground. They can rival cosmic presences not by rewriting metaphysics, but by exploiting specific mechanisms that magnify their will: biological secrets, sacrificial rituals, techniques that turn the Force into appetite. Those mechanisms let them reshape politics, economies, and ecologies, while simultaneously creating the weaknesses that allow opponents, alliances, investigators, or chance to push back. Artifacts, civilizations, and special locations often provide the external scaffolding these individuals use. Context, as much as raw power, determines who counts as the most powerful being in any given story. If individuals can turn rituals, secrets, or addictions into engines of galactic change, the next question is where those engines come from. The third category of Star Wars power is not a person at all, but the built and inherited scaffolding that magnifies an agent's will. Civilizations, artifacts, locations, and the technologies of empire. These are the levers that let a mortal tilt politics, geology, or the Force itself, and they shape who can plausibly be called most powerful in any story. Ancient cultures in legends frequently left systems so vast they function like gods. The Rakata Infinite Empire used Force-based engineering to build the Star Forge, a production engine that converted dark side influence into ships, weapons, and armies. The Celestials, or Architects, are credited with megastructures that rearranged hyperspace lanes and planetary environments. Their ruins signal powers beyond contemporary comprehension. In these cases, distributed infrastructure, city-sized constructs, locked-away machines, or factory systems, becomes the practical equivalent of divinity for whoever controls it. Planet-scale technology is the clearest modern form of that idea. The Death Star, canon, is the franchise's obvious example, a weapon built around kyber crystals to focus energy on a planet-killing scale. Its threat came from design systems and specialized supply chains, vulnerabilities that let a rebel saboteur topple it. In Legends, the Star Forge played a similar role, overwhelming production and reach that could rule the galaxy but still be destroyed. Exegol, canon, repeats the pattern. Hidden cloning vats, a secret fleet and cult infrastructure that amplifies Palpatine's will. Constructed power matters because it can be built, defended, stolen, or dismantled. That manipulability keeps it narratively useful. Locations and nexuses are a different class of amplifier, places where the Force itself is concentrated or where metaphysical rules bend. Mortis, the Clone Wars, manifests archetypes of the Force, creating a theater where ordinary rules change. The world between worlds, Rebels, grants access to time and causality beyond usual ability. Legends offers sites like the Valley of the Jedi, locales that enhance Force sensitivity across wide areas. These places don't make a single character omnipotent, but possession or knowledge of them enables effects otherwise impossible: resurrection, temporal intervention, or long-term influence. For that reason, they become prizes to be fought over, and recurring mechanisms authors use to expand a character's reach without rewriting cosmology. Artifacts and rituals are the personal side analogues of civilizational power. Kyber crystals are living, Force-attuned minerals that bind to lightsabers and, in sufficient concentration, act as immense energy conduits. The Death Star's super laser is, at root, a kyber amplification. Holocrons condense generations of knowledge into portable advantage. Then there are practices that alter the body or soul, Sith sorcery that bends biology, Night Sister magics that reanimate or mutate, and Sith techniques for essence transfer and unnatural longevity across canon and legends. These methods can lift a practitioner beyond ordinary limits, but they come with preconditions: rare components, precise lore, occult, or catastrophic side effects. And those requirements are exactly where stories attach counterplay. That last point is critical. Constructed power gives scale, but it also introduces choke points. The Star Forge needed control of factory systems. The Death Star depended on kyber and an extensive logistics network. Exegol relied on secrecy and cult resources. Rituals to escape death demand knowledge, victims, or special locations. Authors preserve meaningful opposition by building in dependencies on materials, information, or place. Those dependencies create opportunities for resistance, theft, sabotage, investigation, and moral choice. In practice, the greatest threats to constructed power are often mundane: discovery, theft, destruction, or the social collapse of the institution that protects it. There's also a qualitative difference between the kinds of power these mechanisms produce. Civilization-scale technologies and artifacts tend to be predictable and mechanical. A super laser destroys planets. A production engine builds fleets. Force nexuses and ritual sorceries bend metaphysics in ways that feel mythic. They permit resurrection, time slicing, or personality fusion. That divergence matters when ranking most powerful. A planet-eating weapon can end civilizations, but can be hidden, stolen, or blown up. A force nexus can enable bizarre miracles that alter destinies, but usually cannot be wielded by anyone who lacks the right bond. Power therefore fragments into categories: brute destructive capacity, metaphysical leverage, and knowledge-based exploitation, each with distinct vulnerabilities. Concrete comparisons make the point. Darth Nihilus, Legends, embodied a pathological ability to feed on whole worlds, a biological force pathology with planet-scale consequences. The Starforge could field fleets to enforce galactic order without a single invulnerable leader. The World Between Worlds enabled time intervention beyond ordinary force users. Exegol's factories let Sidious recreate a force his single body could not sustain without institutional support. None of these is the simple, most powerful across all contexts. Each dominates within a defined arena and can be checked by plausible countermeasures. Power in Star Wars is often a product of context. Individuals can be terrifying, but their reach is frequently a function of what they control. The engines of an ancient civilization, a cache of Kyber, a metaphysical site, or a ritual kept in secret. Constructed sources let characters punch above their biological weight, but those same structures create narrative points of leverage that keep conflict possible. That hybridity between person and infrastructure, myth and material, is why the franchise rarely hands out absolute supremacy. Institutions and artifacts can raise individuals to near cosmic effect, yet the particular conditions that enable those effects are exactly what make them contestable. Concrete comparisons show why no single entry can claim total supremacy. Darth Nihilus consumed worlds. The Starforge built fleets to enforce rule. The World Between Worlds let users rewrite events, and Exegol's industry turned ritual into revival. Each dominates a specific arena and can be countered by different means. Star-eating hunger meets strategic containment. An ancient factory needs supply lines. Metaphysical gateways require metaphysical access. So who is the most powerful? It depends on the question you ask. Raw destructive reach, political control, temporal influence, or the ability to reshape life? Power in Star Wars is multi-layered. Cosmic forces, exceptional individuals, and constructed sources all claim supremacy in different ways. Rather than a single definitive ranking, the strongest being depends on the criteria and context. Recognizing those layers clarifies the myths and themes that drive the saga.